Pinboard thumbnails. They are all over YouTube right now, and for good reason. They are the perfect blend of organized chaos, but still something recognizable and easy to understand. In today's video, I'm going to show you step by step on how to create this exact thumbnail and how you can replicate it to your own channel. It's honestly very simple if you have a little bit of Photoshop knowledge. So with that being said, let's jump into it and let's start designing. Okay, so I found this image of a pinboard on Envato Elements, and I think it's going to work perfect for the background of this thumbnail. Let's go ahead and throw it into Photoshop and just use generative AI to get rid of these little distractions that we don't need and don't want. There we go. Let's also expand this image so that it fits the whole thumbnail. And there we go. Just like that, we have the background for the thumbnail. Next, we need to find a piece of burnt paper to throw in the middle of this thumbnail, just like this, to have our subject's face on it. And once again, Envato coming in clutch, this piece of paper is going to work perfectly. There we go. I think it looks great. Next up, grab your subject and place them in the middle of the paper. In this case, I'm going to use myself as the subject. I think right around here looks great. Next, let's start color correcting my image and making myself look a lot more presentable. Let's go into camera raw filter here and just mess with some of the settings. This picture was pretty perfectly lit, so I'm not gonna be doing much to it. Maybe raise the shadows, the whites a little bit, and the blacks. Go ahead and up the texture, just messing with the colors here a tad, and let's go ahead and sharpen it. There we go, looking slightly better. Like I said, not too big of changes needed. Next, let's add a hue and saturation layer, bring the saturation all the way down and bump up the lightness. Let's invert the mask and start painting over my eyeballs and teeth just to make things pop a little bit more. There we go. The eyes are done. Now the teeth. There we go. Everything just pops a little bit more. Nice. I'm loving the look of this. Now I'm just going to paint over this thumbnail and kind of map out where I want the other elements, other paper, and other images to go. Let's do it. Okay, so I'm thinking a layout like this is going to look beautiful. So let's start searching for some other pieces of paper. Okay, now that I have all of the pieces of paper placed into the thumbnail, let's go ahead to try and find some red thread that rhymed to connect all of these pieces of paper together. I don't think we could have found a more perfect image. Now, all I am doing to connect all of these is using the distort transform to place them all in the middle of each other. There we go. I'm loving the look of this. Next, let's grab a little push pin that we can place on the middle of all of these. I think this image of this bottom push pin right here is going to work perfectly. So let's go ahead and cut this out. Okay, now that all the push pins are in place and everything else is where we want it to be, we can start to add the shadows. Let's go ahead and do that. The simplest way to add a shadow to these elements is by adding a drop shadow. With the click of a button, it already looks almost perfect. Maybe just needs a little bit of tweaking, and there we go. I love the look of the shadow underneath the thread. We can do a similar thing to the push pins, and there's our shadows for the thread and the pins. Next, in order to add these shadows on the papers, we can do the same thing and just use a drop shadow. And there we go. Just like that, we have all of our shadows in place. I may have forgotten about the shadow on the money. Now we have all of our shadows in place. Next, let's move on to finding some fire elements to put all around the papers to make it look like they're kind of burning up and give this thumbnail a little more flair. Okay, so I have grabbed a handful of fire assets, and now I'm just going to go around the pieces of paper and kind of map out where I want these flames to go. Okay, I got all the fire mapped out and placed just about where I think I'm going to want them to be, but it still doesn't look great. And the reason is you can't really see the fire right now because the fire is on light backgrounds, when in reality it should be on burned paper, which is almost black. So I went ahead and I found this picture, which I'm going to try and overlay on top of all the paper where the flames are. Just placing them around like this, you can already see how big of a difference this made. And just like that, you can tell how big of a difference this made. It looks so much more realistic. The next thing we need to do is start adding some elements to the paper, some text, some logos, whatever you want to do, whatever your story is about. Also, don't forget to get creative with it. I got my first element down, the YouTube logo down here. I'm just going to continue that same process until all the papers are filled up and I'm happy with the result. Down here, I thought it would be fun to add some of the people that I've worked with in the past. Now I just got to blend them in and actually make it look like they are on the paper. And there we go. I'm very happy with how this looks with all the elements in place. Next, let's go ahead and add the last piece of text in this little box down here. Obviously, this isn't what it's going to be, but you should do what it says. All right, I like the look of this and the placement. Let's go ahead and add just a little bit of drop shadow to the red box now, just like that. And now let's also add a stroke to our text, and there we go. Now let's go ahead and do a little bit of camera raw filter to the actual board itself, because we never did that in the beginning. There we go, just making everything a little more dull to give it a more serious look, and a nice vignette. There we go. Let's see how this looks. Oh, that's beautiful. It looks a lot better. From this, it looks a little dull, lacking contrast, and then this. The next thing we can do to really make this thumbnail pop is to add a little bit of glow coming off of the fire. To do this, I'm going to take a really soft and low flow brush and just paint over the fire. There we go. Now let's go ahead and put this on hard light. And that's a little bit intense. So let's take our layer styles and do blend if black. Just take that all the way to the right. And let's turn down the opacity a tiny bit to about 65. I like that. Next, let's paint some shadows around our thumbnail, kind of like this. Once again, low opacity and low flow, just to kind of center the attention of the thumbnail in the middle where we want it to be, just like that. And finally, last but not least, let's add our final camera raw filter to this thumbnail and finish it up. Up the exposure a tiny bit. Let's up the contrast. We can lower the highlights. The shadows can also be lowered a little. There we go. We can up the texture and the clarity a tad. And there we go with the final adjustments. This is how our thumbnail turned out. It looks so good. I love all the elements we added and how creative you can get with this type of thumbnail. I can really see why this is such a viral thumbnail. It just looks so clean and it's such a great way of creating organized chaos. With that being said, I hope you enjoyed this video and I hope you were able to follow along or learn some things in the process. Subscribe to become a better thumbnail designer and take your channel to the next level. Peace out.